Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. You know, our guest today, Bessi Graham, might be best known as an entrepreneur with a heart. Bessi works primarily with business leaders on figuring out how to establish what she calls a blend of high profits and meaningful impact. She believes that business leaders can be profound agents of change in a world hungry for impact and meaning, and they can make money at the same time. Bessi is an award-winning entrepreneur with over 20 years' experience with business owners, governments, large funding bodies to bring doing good and making money in the same space. So, I was thinking, I was wondering if Bessi might be able to apply her business principles of blending success and meaning to as she does to businesses, if she could bring it to each and every one of us as individual people. Well, I guess you can guess, since she's on the show, Bessi can do just that, and I can't wait to hear from her. So let's welcome her. Bessi Graham, welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It's lovely to be with you.
Bessi, I just have to tell you, you in Australia, I don't like to use the word accent, but your form of speech is just so charming. Everything you say is charming.
Thank you. There you go. That's probably a good thing for a podcast if people have to listen to you.
Yeah, I wonder, are you even charming when you're angry?
Oh, is anyone charming when they're angry?
Well, I think Australians may be. You guys are so different.
There you go. Yeah, well, maybe if you're not an Australian, I might be charming when I'm angry, but...
Okay, so you know what I was thinking might be a good way for us to begin the show is that you have a mission for guiding business leaders on how to blend profits and have the integrity of a personal impact, that the two are not separate functions, but they work together. Can you tell me just a bit what that means?
Sure, and I think in some ways, Charlie, it actually ties right back to your point around, in today's conversation, how does that actually apply for all of us as people? Because when someone has spent a long time, and even since they were a young child, has been associated as a natural leader or a born leader, there can be a stripping away of and a forgetting that we are all human, and you can end up playing a role. And so I do really strongly believe that these ideas are relevant for anyone, whether you are a business leader or you running a local football club for kids. It doesn't matter what you're doing. These are pieces that are about exploring and tapping into what it means to more fully be human, which is relevant for all of us, I think, because otherwise we're just falling into that trap of playing a role or being one-dimensional.
That's such a great way to put it, of being human. And there's something about when you put on that business attire or that business face, we no longer have business attire post-Zoom and shorts and flip-flops and all of that.
Above the waist we do, yeah.
Yes, above the waist. But, there is this sense of forgetting the humanity and like I'm fond of quoting that the purpose of our life individually is to contribute to the value of society, but that doesn't mean at the expense of our own needs and our own value. And you seem to advocate that with your business. Do I have that right?
You do, because I think the piece I like a win-win, right? So I always like to make sure I'm looking at, okay, how do both sides of this equation play out? Whether that is for an individual and is saying, okay, we're trying to build a business here that can make money, deliver great products or services, but you are also important as the leader or the owner of that business, and how do we sustain you in that process? So I see it as a bit of a way to tap into and be conscious of your thinking process in anything and saying, okay, don't just obsess over one side of the equation, look at both. And that is really important when we look at, even on the back of COVID, and the levels of exhaustion and burnout that are present across the board in society now, when people have had that time to stop and reflect and question whether they want to keep living at the pace and in the way they were before.
So that's a very fascinating question, because people are beginning, I think in my particular business, I'm always focusing in on meaning and value of life, but a lot of people focus on that earlier, but as they get older, it becomes even more common that, they begin to think things like legacy and does my bank account represent my legacy, and if it does, it's one that's going to be forgotten, and I'm not going to impact a lot of people with it.
Yes, that question, and you're right, different people come to that crossroads at different points in their life, but we all reach it at some point where you do say, is this all there is? Like, is it enough for me that I have a great title, or my bio on LinkedIn is impressive, or people think that I'm amazing because I have a big house or position? Are those things enough to feel that broader sense of purpose or meaning in life? And my answer to that is no, it's not enough. And I think that almost the piece that makes that tricky, Charlie, when you get to that point and you realise, this isn't feeling satisfying, it's actually difficult to admit that when you have created this massive production or facade around you of a life that ticks all those boxes. It can be difficult for people to admit that this is not actually satisfying.
What a good observation. I think, I've not thought of it necessarily in those exact terms, but we get, we call it, we get stuck, we get in a rut, we get going down the path, and I'm known for quite frequently talking about the few good sides and the lot of negative sides of the American dream, which is very individualistic. It's very all about me. It's not about serving society. It's about how can I grow. And that's why people are immigrating to the United States, because they want a better life. So I have nothing to say negatively about that, except that if you only pursue that leads, doesn't that lead to burnout and sort of loss of passion, and that, Scrooge McDuck counting his coins in the big room doesn't really satisfy?
Yes, my answer is no. and I think that when you look back over human history, the answer to that question being no is across the board where people land, whether it's looking at ancient Greek philosophers or it's looking in the Far East or wherever you look. People who have deeply reflected on that question have always landed in a place that says there actually has to be more to what your life is and what you're contributing to than just a personal drive for achievement or position in order to actually feel that satisfaction and fulfillment.
Yeah. One of the beauties, there's a lot of talk around that, but around that idea, and I certainly concur, support, endorse, I embrace that idea. But you bring a new element, I don't know if it's new, but an uncommon element to that, and you say, you can do that and make money. You don't have to do that instead of making money. As a matter of fact, if you make money doing that, you can have an even more impact on the good you're doing, the more money you make. So, what I'm curious, Bessi, can you give me, think of one of your clients that does well in their P&L and balance sheet and their EBITDA, but at the same time, there's a purpose-driven sort of mission of doing good. Do you have an example of a leader or a company that's like that?
Yeah, of course. So, look, I think that one of the pieces that's interesting to begin that exploration is to actually just stop and acknowledge that in the way we're thinking about business or how we contribute in the world, part of the underlying problem is that because we put those into two categories, then our assumption is if you want to do good or make a difference in the world, then you should make decisions about going into the charitable sector or running a non-profit or setting up a foundation. And our assumption on the other end is if you've started a business, that is about making money. So if we look at an example, there's an incredible woman that I've worked with who is actually based in Washington, D.C., Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver. And she's a perfect example of this, where she had spent a lot of time in the sort of advocacy policy space. She's obviously incredibly intelligent, has a PhD, and her focus was always around trying to make a difference in bridging the wealth gap and the earning capacity between black communities in the US and others. And so she had gone with that passion into the non-profit space, trying to influence policy, and thought that was how she was going to make the biggest difference. What she's actually ended up doing in the last few years is instead setting up her own business and seeing that as how she contributes. And she's directly working with attempting to support black women entrepreneurs to build up their businesses, because the research that she's seen in her background is that while black women in America are the number one demographic starting businesses, on average, the typical black woman is only making $24,000 a year in that business. So her focus now is that she is directly supporting them and working with them to build up profitable businesses. In the process, she's now got a multi-seven-figure-a-year business herself and is committed to and driving incredible outcomes with women at this point in the US, but this year she's beginning to expand internationally. And I think that type of approach, where you have an issue you care about and you decide to use your core business activities to both address that problem well and make a difference in the world, but unapologetically do it in a way that actually is profitable and makes money for the business.
I love that example. I didn't realize that black women start businesses more than
number one demographic. Yeah.
Number one demographic, and they only make $24K.
$24K a year. Yeah.
Oh my.
So it's worth checking out some of her work, because she's an incredible advocate for this group of people, but as I said, does it in a way that isn't saying, let's set up a program that is both patronising and philanthropically funded. It's saying, no, we can do this in a way that becomes this beautiful, mutually reinforcing sort of cycle that we create, where there is the right skills and support being provided, and it is getting the results and outcomes. So that, I think, is a good example of a business, when done intentionally, actually being able to get better outcomes than if we just went down the non-profit road.
Yeah, the business model itself incorporates both dimensions. That is
exactly, that is
what it's about. Now, what about companies that the business model, their product is not, maybe not a meaningful product in the way that your Washington D.C. doctor is working on, but what are your opinions about CSRs, about corporate social responsibility? Is that just kind of let's just pass it off and say we're doing it so we can look good, or is there something important going on in CSRs?
Look, I think it can be a good starting point. But I always say to people, good intentions aren't good enough. And my experience in the last sort of over 20 years has been that too often the CSR approach doesn't go much beyond good intentions. And the limitation of it, in my mind, is to do with the fact that it is still keeping the doing good piece as separate to core business, as not about the main operational activities of that organisation, and it's a nice to have on the side. Now, what that means is you genuinely find that the people running those departments aren't those that actually have decision-making rights. They're not connected to the executive. They are at the whim of, has the company had a good year? Therefore, they've got a little bit of extra cash to throw to this nice little activity over to the right. And so that piece means it's limited. And in the work, and you picked up on this in your comment related to Dr. Avis, which is that in the work I'm doing, I'm always trying to get people to go, okay, how do we make the doing good part actually be the whole cake, not just the icing on the cake? And I think CSR is the icing on the cake. So I would prefer to sit with someone and work out, what are those decisions you have control over? How are you spending money? How are you treating people? What does your supply chain look like? To get into those pieces that are core to how you operate the business and sort that out of how does that contribute in the world, even if you only ever break even. And if we get that right, then we can absolutely go on to some pieces of, okay, now would we like to donate a percentage of profit? That can become something that is the add-on at the end rather than the primary focus of the work.
Yeah, I feel you're so right on when you say CSRs, and they're better than nothing, but not always a lot, because they're tangential to the business. They're, I don't know how many companies allocate significant funds to CSRs, and they also, a large driver, and I hate to say it, and I would love to have corporations come in and tell me, Charlie, you're full of it, but it's a tax write-off. Yes. So there's a financial benefit to doing good more than just the doing good. You said something in your last phrase that really struck my attention, and you talk. How are they treating people? Do you view corporate culture the way a leader will, and it's the way parents run a family, the culture of a family? Are you raising healthy kids? Are you raising nutty, schizophrenic, self-centered kids? Do you equate creating a good culture with the aspect of doing good? Is that part of a business model, or is that separate?
No, it's definitely part of both the business model and the way you can do good in the world. When I'm looking at a business model, there's obviously so many different ways you could do good, and every person needs to figure out what does that look like for their organisation. But it can be helpful to have some common entry points. And so I always look at 3 focus areas that can be a natural entry as you try to do good. One of those is a customer focus, which is the example that I gave around Dr. Avis Jones de Weaver. So her focus is on making sure by delivering her services, she is creating an impact and a change for her customers that has a ripple effect, which is her doing good in the world. So that's a customer focus where the good that you're doing comes about by the results you get for your customers. The example you just gave around how we treat people and the culture we create, that sits in the second category, which is around a team focus. And it is a critical piece that should be the natural entry point for many, many businesses. If the place you spend the most money is on payroll, then probably a team focus is a good place to start for doing good, because that is where you actually have influence and decision-making rights that you can change that immediately. You can begin to engage differently, make decisions differently. And a team focus, Charlie, is important from a business model perspective, because if we're looking at this and saying we want to take responsibility and actually very intentionally have a positive impact on our team, on the employees within our organisation, But because we're taking this approach, this both and approach instead of either or, it's not a zero-sum game. We're trying to create a win-win. Mm-hmm. What that means is, at the same time, we have to do these things and make these changes and create that culture in a way that also makes financial sense. Because if we go to an extreme and then we end up having to shut the business down, then in fact now we can't support that team at all and they're all unemployed, right? So we have to resist the urge to go to extremes, and we have to look at both pieces. So with a team focus and that development of a culture, what it allows you to do is to have that genuine focus on how are you looking out for the well-being of your staff, how are you ensuring they have safe working conditions and fair pay and all of those pieces in place. But you also at the same time will find that the competitive advantages and the financial components that connect to that are that you will see reductions in recruitment costs, in training fees, in the absenteeism that occurs, because you'll have a more engaged staff that stay around for longer. So those reductions in turnover will have financial benefit to it. And you will also have a team with the energy and passion to serve your customers better.
Yeah, that will be even more productive.
So I absolutely agree with you that piece, like I said, sits in that second category of team focus. And just briefly, that third focus area is around production. So for businesses who actually have a supply chain, who are making a product, then the way to do good in those business models is to drill into that back end of your business, look at supply chain, look at the conditions of workers in the supply chain, look at the aspects around environmental consequences of packaging and production, all of those types of things. So they're those three entry points.
That's great. So you have, I got 2 and 3. So you got culture and you got productivity. What was number 1 again?
Oh, the first one was the customer focus. So that was
customer focus. Yes, understanding your clients. Yeah. Oh, what a turn! No wonder you're successful. Those are anything that is simple and rings true is typically an indicator of wisdom. And when it becomes complex, it's something else. And this is so strong. I so admire that. And I no longer, I am an executive coach a little bit, but I don't really coach large companies anymore. But, and it's been just a handful of years since I've done it. But culture was not big it was just starting to emerge as I was winding down as a consultant. If I was doing corporate consulting today, that would be my personal focus would be on culture. It's all about the people. If the people are into their job, loving their job, and they're into the mission, they can get into the mission of the company, that they believe in the value of the company, you will have a successful company. That is so important.
Lots of research that shows that.
Oh, incredible! So let's I'm gonna do a little bit of a shift. We're not time for a break yet, Paul. Are we? No. Okay. I want to quote you, and you wrote somewhere. I didn't jot down where it came from, but this is your writing, and you wrote the following. There is no shortage of loud voices imposing their views and value on you. And keep in mind, as we talk pre-show, in the United States, we have no shortage of loud voices attempting to impose their views and values. Everybody, we live in a world of evangelists in the United States. Everybody trying to convert us to their way of thinking, and that means from the higher up politicians to the average CNN or Fox News watcher, trying to do that. And I like this. I like the way you put. There are a lot of there is no shortage of loud voices. And then you also write, I am here to quiet the noise and to provide tools to help you design a meaningful life that aligns with your values. Can you talk to me about noise and tools? Because noise we're just barraged with noise, and I don't think we have adequate tools to manage that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think people who are used to operating as those who jump in and lead, or who are driven towards achievement and setting goals, are more susceptible to that noise than others, because we hear these things. We like to then go, oh, okay, that's what we should do, or that's the goal, that's what has been, presented, or that's where there's pressure and expectation from the world, and we step into that space and move to action very quickly. What that means, though, is that if we haven't done the intentional work to stop and pause long enough to get really clear on our own understanding of what would success mean to me, what is, and that goes to that quiet voice, right, of what are we looking for in this, then we fall into that trap that leads to all of the things we've discussed previously around people getting to a point of exhaustion or burnout, or questioning whether what they have in their life is actually satisfying and fulfilling. And so for me, it's about that piece of encouraging people to slow down and to say, the old saying, slow down to speed up, is actually true if you think about and reflect on the right things in that time. So you can't just go and sit quietly for a little bit and then jump back into the fray. You need to actually, this is where the tools come in, you need to actually have the right pieces to explore to get to that clarity of, like I said, what does success actually mean for you, and what would doing good look like in your life? To your point of the loud voices, the evangelists, people are always telling us what they think success is, or what a good business would do here, or what does business look like, or what does a good parent look like, or in any category there'll be people telling you and putting those judgments and expectations. My experience, and again, like I said before, if you look back at philosophy and you look at all different great thinkers over time, the starting point of know yourself and lead from that point of clarity is always a more effective way to come at it. So
I want to focus on that. Can because you really strike a chord with me. You really strike a chord with me, and for several years in business, I would take, so many times, let me back up, so many times as business leaders, we have vision strategy meetings, and probably 85% of the time they're little value, because no one ever, there's no follow-up mechanism set up to them. So we decide in an off-site, here's what we're going to be, and then it gets filed away in some file and no one pays attention to it. But you know what? You were right, is that the vision, the passionate vision of the company lies in the heart of the leader. And the heart of the leaders, multiple, but the person in charge, really, hopefully, is that carrier of the torch. And I used to, and here was I used to take annual retreats by myself, not with a team, just by myself. I would go to a hotel. And the one rule was I had to wake up and go to sleep there. So I had to spend a full 24 hours. I couldn't just go for a 4-hour thing and spend the night at the hotel and go the next day. I had to have a 24-hour. I would take my flip charts, my pens, my business plans, and it would be just to focus on who do I want to be, what good do I want to do. How can I grow my business? But how can I grow my business in light of service, of serving other people? I did that for every year. I continue to do it in my spiritual life now. I monthly go on a retreat to evaluate myself, my inner core. I'm an extreme self-reflective person, and so trying to find out what I'm doing. But I think, don't you think something like that would be helpful if more people just took a day to figure out, excuse me, but who the hell am I? What drives me? what makes life important to me, and apart from a new Aston Martin.
Yes, exactly. Well, that level of clarity allows you to be so much more decisive. And the important thing is that you not only then can make really big decisions quickly, but you can do them with confidence that they are aligned with your values and with your vision of where you're headed. The problem is so often we want to be decisive as leaders, so we make really quick, bold, big decisions and then proceed to not sleep for 6 months because it was a really bad decision. So it's not just about...
been there, Bessi.
Oh, yeah. But it's not just about being decisive, is it? It is about coming from a place of deep knowing and confidence that, yes, this is who I am, this is who I want to be, where I'm headed, and now as opportunities come up or as challenges come up, I am already informed from that place on how to actually proceed.
And I like your use of the term, as we prepare for a break, I like the use of the term deep knowing. Are you familiar with Cal Worthington's book on deep thinking?
Yes.
Not Worthington, I'm sorry, Cal Newport.
Yes, yep.
And it just, taking time, at least a couple times a week where you are totally alone and you're just, it's an attempt to get into the flow. So you're deep working with yourself, and I like that. So what I want to do, Bessi, is I want to take a break, and I want to come back, and I want to turn this from the business people to personal. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts. You've been brilliant so far. Thank you. Hi there, this is Charlie Hedges, and you are listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie. And today, my very special guest is Bessi Graham, and she is dedicated to the intersection of making profits as you're making a difference in society and culture, individual life. And I love it that she doesn't define what making a difference is. She lets the leader or the individual define meaning in life and purpose and direction themselves. So I have a couple things that let me go ahead and I feel like I'm talking too long here, but I want to bring this illustration because I think it's good. We talk a lot on the show about purpose and meaning. I am involved in a nonprofit, and there are two functions of a nonprofit. Basically, a nonprofit can be boiled down to two functions: one, fulfill a mission, and two, raise the money necessary to implement that mission. Now, everything else in the nonprofit falls under one of those two headings. And as I have considered your niche, your mission, it has occurred to me that this same rule is true for us as an individual, to fulfill our personal mission while making money at the same time. What ideas do you have for me and others like me as individuals who, would I take an Aston Martin? You better believe I'd take an Aston Martin. It's my dream car that I will never have. But doing a mission, changing the lives, impacting the lives of people is so overrides that. What kind of ideas do you have for individuals?
Yeah, so I think you're right in terms of whether it's as a non-profit, a business, or now as we transition into thinking about ourselves as individuals. Those two pieces you talked about around fulfilling a mission and making sure there's enough money to actually deliver on that are critical things to consider. The piece I would add, though, Charlie, is I think there's also a third aspect. And that is around ensuring that the way that you actually raise that money to facilitate the components of your life or the non-profit or the business is actually part of what we also need to look at. So to do that, we have to ask the questions, are we making that money in a way that aligns with our values and is heading in the direction of that vision? Because as individuals, as humans, this conversation is really centrally about the aspects of what will allow us to not just one day, but now sit in a place where we can feel proud of and comfortable and fulfilled in both what we're doing, those activities that are fulfilling the mission, but also the way that we're showing up and our actual behaviour in the raising of the money or the earning of our income as an individual. And when we push those two pieces apart, that's when I think we fall into the difficult situations we've been talking about so far. So as an individual, when we look at this and come back to those reflective exercises that we were just talking about that you and I both love doing, I think it's important to boil it down to that as humans we really need to have clarity around two things, around our values and our vision. Because when we're clear on those things, the values piece grounds us. It's the aspects I mentioned before of it allows us to have that touchstone to come back to and check. Are we behaving in a way that is in line with our values? Are we making decisions aligned with our values? And then the piece that we also need as humans is to feel like we're making progress, we're moving towards something. And so for that, it's critical that we have clarity on what that vision is. Because otherwise we're running really hard, but at what? And so I think that's the starting point for us as individuals, is clarity on the grounded in your values, moving towards your vision.
And there must be some kind of, for me, some kind of a personal accountability of moving toward a vision. That I wrote a book, Bessi, it was 30 years ago. It was 1995 or 1996, and so not quite 30 years ago, but darn near. And it was titled Getting the Right Things Right, Personal Strategies for Reinventing the Life You Want. And there were a couple sections of that I think were very helpful. Like I called it the 4 Ps, and that you must organize your life, or that it would must. I don't like that word. It would be helpful to organize your life around what I called the 4 Ps, and that was passion, purpose, people, and power or praise. And that is, what do you do on a regular basis to keep you passionate? And that would have to do with your values, your fun, and then your purpose. What are you called to do? What are you talented? What are you skilled and gifted at? What kind of results do you like to see from your business? The third one on people, how do you relate to people? Who are your core replenishing relationships, your colleagues? Are you spending time with them? And then in the praise or power, it's sort of that outside spiritual dimension, that there is something else going on just besides us. There is a source or authority out there that has input, objectives, and actions. That's obviously my belief system. And you know what I would do? I would have under each one 4 or 5 little activities, and I would check them monthly. I would not do daily checks, weekly checks. I would go through them monthly. Very simple process. And I'd give a simple plus, check, or minus. Plus, I'm doing excellent. Check, I'm doing satisfactory. Minus, I need to improve. And it was just a great guide. When I'd see a minus a couple months in a row in something, I'd have to make a determination. One, it was a bad goal. It just really didn't fit who I was, or I was failing at something and I needed to improve. And that, do you know how much something as simple as that impacted my life? And then I got to even deeper Bessie, I got to where I had my 10 values in life, and do I live according to my 10 values? These are what's important to me. But it was, there was an accountability piece to it, to where it wasn't like somebody judging me and I wasn't getting evaluated, I wasn't getting critiqued. It was just all up to me. Am I living according to who I want to be? How do you feel about that process?
I think it's a beautiful example of a really simple but powerful tool to do that, tuning into your own voice and quieting the noise of others. Because what you've described there is the aspect of that reflection point where when you look at the list and you say, for a few months in a row now, I've had a minus next to these things. Your example where you said, what that allows you to do is to stop and say, okay, that doesn't just mean I should automatically do more in that area. First, I need to ask, is it actually a minus because I'm choosing not to do it because it's really not important to me? I put it on the list because it was presented to me as important, but actually I don't value it. So there's a reflection point in what you just described that actually makes sure you're testing in an ongoing way, are these really the things that I want to be doing? Or are there still elements I'm processing on my journey around chasing things that are from loud external voices rather than my own? Once you decide that, you then make a decision about, okay, given my answer to that, I now either need to put more focus on it or in fact I'm taking it off the list. So I think that's a beautiful way of doing that. The other piece that sits within your approach there around getting the right things right is that it taps into this piece that I always use, which is around saying we're multifaceted as humans. There's nuance to us, and whenever we find ourselves in a position where we're taking an extreme or we're being one-dimensional, then that's sort of a little alarm bell that says, ooh, what's going on here? And in the 4 Ps that you described, each of those has a really lovely aspect to it that is multi-dimensional. So I think that there's lots of people and thinking around things like, say, for example, purpose and the idea. There's a professor in the US, Dr. Whelan, who talks about purpose is pro-social. And so she has these really great descriptions around both the research that shows how we are more effective when we have a clear sense of purpose, but that purpose also has that component that you discussed of it's bigger than us as an individual. So I think there's some really good research too that would absolutely back up all of those 4 Ps as a beautiful way to stop ourselves becoming one-dimensional or sitting in an extreme.
Well, those are very kind words. That really moves me. I'm studying a course right now, and the author of the course is from a book called Falling Upward, 2 Halves of Life. The first half, you are intent on developing a strong ego, and this is from, that the ego is a dangerous animal, but we need in our early years, we need that narcissistic fix. We need that idea that we are okay, we are strong, we can do whatever we need to do. But then in the second half of life, he says we need to sort of drop that narcissistic fix, since we have it, and turn it into a corporate fix, that we are now dealing with a corporate group of people. And he has these, he calls them the 3 stories: my story, our story, and the story. And every one of those stories integrate. And that my story must be integrated with our story, how I am community. And both of them then fall under the rubric of the story, which is even greater, which is a story of celebration of life, of love, of kindness, of goodness. And I just get a sense that's what you're all about.
Yeah, and I think that piece and the concept you're talking about of beginning to be more tuned into how interconnected everything is, that's at the heart of all of this. Because if we start to see those connections and the flow and effects of any decisions we're making, then I think we will both be more impactful in a positive sense in terms of our contribution on the world, but we will also be more effective in what we're doing, which allows us to come back to that place of doing good and making money.
Bessi, you are incredible. I want to recommend you to so many friends to hire you, and I know you're busy. I've got on the links, I have your website, and then I have your LinkedIn address. Is there anything else that you would want? If if people are interested in talking to you about future business or wisdom, are you interested in receiving that kind of feedback or that kind of questions?
Yeah, of course. And look, those are the two easiest ways. From the website, you can find my podcast. So if you just want to listen a little bit more to some of these ideas, because there is a lot. As you said, yes, it's simple, but it's also a big mindset shift. So if people just want to sit with these ideas, then from the website you can follow the links to the podcast. But absolutely, people can reach out to me via LinkedIn or the website directly.
Perfect. We have that. Bessi Graham, you have surpassed any of my hopes for this show. That you have the information is so powerful, and I appreciate your insight, your passion, compassion, and your ability to focus on business. Thank you for being with us. It's been just such a delight.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, and I want to thank all our listeners for tuning into the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.